Atmospheric rupture in progress. Shielding down. Hull integrity compromised. The command deck of the Harbinger of Dominion vibrated with the shriek of failing metal. Warning glyphs flared across the control slabs, flashing signals of catastrophe as the ship lurched violently under unseen blows. Overlord Sithrak's secondary pair of eyelids slid back, his obsidian gaze locking onto the holographic tactical display. A fleet that had crushed 100 warfronts now found itself staggering under the weight of an invisible counterattack. "Report!" he growled, mandibles clicking in irritation. Legate Orvos Carr braced himself against the command dais, his talons curling over its edges. "We initiated orbital suppression 5 minutes ago, but Earth's planetary defenses are not responding logically." He hesitated, a rare flicker of doubt slithering into his tone. "It's not like the others, Overlord." Sithrak's ridged brow pulled tight. Not like the others? Deathworlds had been the Vakar's proving grounds since the dawn of their expansion. Planets with skies of boiling acid, tectonic plates that shattered like brittle bone, ecosystems that slaughtered intruders before they took their second breath. These were their conquests. And yet, this one fought back differently. Outside the command viewport, Earth loomed, a marble of blues, greens, and swirling white storms, deceptively tranquil. Beneath that fragile exoskeleton, something stirred, something old, something waiting. "Deploy the first wave," Sithrak ordered. "Burn their defenses. I want this planet broken before their sun sets." Orvos Habazot. "We already have, Overlord. They're not responding to planetary siege protocols." A spark of irritation lashed through Sithrak's veins. "Then strike deeper. Scorch their strongholds." Legate Orvos exhaled sharply. "That's the problem. There are no clear strongholds." He waved a claw over the tactical feed. "They aren't centralizing their defenses like rational species. They scatter their forces, yet they strike with surgical brutality." His mandibles tightened. "Our drop pods never reported back from Siberia. The jungle assault in their equatorial region has gone dark, and the Death Valley operation ceased communications within minutes." Sithrak's jaw flexed. The three-pronged invasion was meant to be an overwhelming demonstration of power. Siberia, an uninhabitable, frozen wasteland where only the strongest could endure. The equatorial jungles, a crucible of heat, disease, and biological nightmares. Death Valley, a hellscape where even the air sought to erase those who stepped onto its cracked skin. In any other conquest, these would have been the first victories. Instead, his warriors were vanishing. "Then adapt," Sithrak growled. "Initiate full planetary bombardment. If they refuse to surrender, we reduce them to nothing." "Already in progress, Overlord." At his command, the first bombardment wave thundered downward, streaking through the sky like celestial daggers. Plasma lances carved through cloud banks, hurling storms of burning atmosphere over major population zones. But something was wrong. The impact wasn't registering. Orvos slammed his claws against his control slab. "Our targeting is being interfered with." His eyes darted over incoming data streams. "No, it's being manipulated. Our own systems are being fed false positioning data. The weapons are hitting empty coordinates." A predator's snarl curled across Sithrak's maw. "Impossible. They don't have the infrastructure for that level of cyber warfare." The ship's interior lurched again. This time something struck back, not from orbit, from the ground. A searing bolt of kinetic energy speared through the Vakar warship Ravager's Lament, splitting its armored belly open like a gutted beast. Another impact followed, this one an invisible force that seemed to pull the maelstrom of conquest downward, its thrusters screaming against an unseen gravity well. Orvos's talons dug into the deck. "They're using—" His voice cut out as a shockwave erupted from the planet itself, rippling through the void, collapsing entire sections of their formation. Sithrak finally felt it. The pull, the trap, the waiting jaws of the monster beneath. And Earth was no longer still. On the surface, beneath the cold steel sky, Grant Halstead watched the first Vakar ships burn. The screen in front of him displayed the precise moment Earth's countermeasures activated. Orbital disruption fields redirecting Dominion targeting systems, kinetic artillery platforms launching precision strikes, entire city grids shifting into defense patterns like living creatures preparing to strike. This wasn't resistance. This was the beginning of the hunt. Fleet reports successful interdiction, Admiral Dirk Savrin announced, his voice clipped and cold. Took them less than 5 minutes to realize they're being played. Marshal Aldrich Kane leaned back in his chair, rolling a steel cartridge between his fingers. Good. Let them understand what it means to underestimate Earth. Grant's gaze remained fixed on the enemy fleet. They'll escalate, he said. They won't accept an unseen enemy. They'll send ground forces to confirm their kills. Let them, Kane replied. That's when we start the culling. Deep beneath the reinforced layers of Earth's military command centers, Project Black Dawn hummed to life. Dr. Quentin Voss stared at the interface, hands clasped behind his back. Once they engage us directly, they'll have already lost. A silent countdown pulsed across the war table. Sithrak's personal dreadnought, harbinger of Dominion, shuddered again. Reports screamed across the command deck. Planetary suppression was failing. Cyber warfare was twisting their targeting. The ground war had begun before they even set foot on soil. Orvos Carr turned toward him, eyes shadowed. Overlord, we are not fighting a species. We are fighting a world that was built for war. Sithrak exhaled slowly, watching the planet spin below, its deceptive calm fraying at the edges. The silence before the slaughter. He was beginning to understand. Earth had never been a world to conquer. It was a world waiting for its next predator. And now the Dominion had stepped into the ring. Sithrak stared at the shifting planet below. The illusion of stillness had shattered. Earth was awake now, a beast roused from slumber, its defenses no longer hidden, but moving with coordinated lethality. He curled his claws against the control slab, irritation churning beneath his exoskeletal frame. No world had ever resisted this long. "Deploy the shock troops," he commanded. Legate Orvos Carr hesitated. "Overlord, we still don't have a full grasp of—" "I said deploy them." Sithrak's mandibles twitched, his patience thinning. "Their resistance means nothing if we break them faster than they can regroup. The longer we wait, the deeper their claws sink into our strategy." Orvos relented, slamming his fist onto the command relay. Ground deployment commencing. Across the Dominion fleet, drop bays hissed open. Vakar warships, still reeling from Earth's unexpected counterattacks, pivoted into formation, spewing troop carriers from their bellies. Metallic beasts descended in waves, cutting through the planet's atmosphere with the force of a planetary landslide. They weren't just landing. They were about to tear through whatever stood in their way. Inside the lead assault carrier, General Zirath Morn stood amidst the swarm of armored warriors. His breathing was slow, measured. He had slaughtered his way across 100 worlds, made kings kneel, watched empires crumble to the march of the Dominion. Earth would be no different. "Cities first," he growled. "Break their infrastructure. Force them to fight on ground of our choosing." His warriors slammed their fists against their breastplates in response. The drop alarm blared. The hatches yawned open. They fell. Wind screamed past their reinforced armor as the drop pods tore through layers of cloud cover. Below them the human capital stretched wide, a network of artificial canyons and glimmering spires. The cityscape was deceptively clean-cut, its rigid organization betraying a world that had prepared for war far longer than it admitted. Morn's display flickered, showing massive electromagnetic disruptions pulsing from the ground. The human defense grids were still active, but the Vakar had weathered worse. The first impact struck. A pod to his left veered off course, thrown sideways by an invisible force. It spun wildly, slamming into a skyscraper before detonating in a brutal explosion of shrapnel and fire. Another went dark, then another. By the time Morn's own pod slammed into the surface, the battle had already begun. Metal screeched. The impact crushed the pavement beneath him, sending shock waves through the street. His restraints unlatched, and he emerged from the pod as the rest of his legion hit the ground with thunderous force. Around him, Dominion warriors unfurled like blackened specters, their weapons igniting with searing plasma. "Advance!" They stormed forward. And that's when the ground itself turned against them. One of his vanguard troops took a step forward and vanished. No cry, no sound. Just gone. Morn's secondary pair of eyes darted toward the shadows between buildings. There had been something there, a movement, impossibly quick. Then another. Another warrior fell. This time Morn saw it. Not a creature. A human. They didn't fight like the others. No desperate flailing. No last-stand bravery. They waited in the dark, moved like whispers, and struck like phantoms. Plasma bolts flared through the alleys, but the shots hit nothing but ghosts. And then, the explosions. Streetlights flickered. The walls of the buildings detonated inward, sending sheets of debris collapsing onto the Dominion forces. Warriors were buried alive, their roars cutting off as entire structures turned into weapons. Morn bared his fangs. Counterattack! He lifted his plasma caster, scanning the rooftops for heat signatures. There. A flash of movement. He fired. The blast tore through a ledge, sending stone and dust plummeting. But the human was already gone. They were toying with them. A voice crackled in his communicator. "General, urban grids are collapsing on our squads. We've lost 2 divisions. Morn pivoted. Status of aerial support? Jammed. The officer's voice was ragged. "Sir, it's not just a blockade. They've hijacked our targeting systems. We're blind." Morn's grip tightened. He had faced resistance before. He had faced deathworlders before. But never this. Another explosion erupted to his right. Not from a plasma bolt, from beneath the pavement. The ground split apart, revealing hidden charges lined beneath the streets. Humans had turned the entire foundation into a battlefield. Morn watched as his warriors stumbled, caught between unpredictable traps, shadows that struck without warning, and an enemy that never engaged in a fair fight. This wasn't war. This was a hunt, and the Vakar had walked straight into the maw of the predator. In orbit, Sithrak watched the battle unfold from the harbinger of Dominion's command deck. His claws tapped against the display as the fleet relayed fragmented distress signals. Cities weren't supposed to swallow armies whole. The humans should have been defensive, should have been fighting from desperation. Instead, they fought with the patience of executioners. A whisper of unease curled in the back of his mind. "Overlord," Orvos Carr murmured, voice low. "We've always fought species that resisted, that struggled, that broke." He swallowed. "This one is different." Sithrak's fingers curled into a fist. "How?" Carr turned toward him, the deep shadows of the battle reflected in his dark eyes. "Because we were the predators on every world before this one." His mandibles tightened. "And now?" Carr's voice barely broke a whisper. "Now. We are the hunted." The battlefield reeked of ionized air and scorched metal. Smoke coiled through the ruined streets, twisting between skeletal buildings that still stood, defiant and unbroken. The city was no longer a place of industry or civilization. It had become something else entirely, a labyrinth designed for slaughter. General Sirath Morn ground his claws against the shattered pavement, his pulse hammering against his skull. His legion was bleeding out, cut down by shadows. The humans had never fought like prey. They had fought like the architects of a war already won. He had underestimated them. They all had. A broken transmission crackled through his comlink. "General, traps beneath the surface, tunnels everywhere. The voice cut out in a violent burst of static. Another squad lost. Another unit swallowed whole by the city's shifting jaws. Morn clenched his mandibles, scanning the smoke-choked alleyways, searching for movement. The silence was worse than the firefights. The quiet meant they were already dead, and they just didn't know it yet. "Regroup at the primary drop zone," he ordered. "We recalibrate. We adapt." His warriors obeyed without hesitation, forming defensive perimeters as they retreated. Their steps crunched over the shattered remnants of their own armor, of their own fallen. The humans weren't chasing them. They didn't need to. They let the city itself hunt. In orbit, Sithrak observed the planet-wide conflict through shifting, fractured feeds. His dark eyes flicked over the tactical display, casualties mounting at a rate that defied logic. He had been certain Earth's destruction was inevitable, a simple exercise in Dominion supremacy. Instead, his fleet was unraveling. "Deploy the remaining fleet divisions," he commanded, voice cold. "Burn their strongholds to the ground. I want their military severed before dawn." Legate Orvos Carr hesitated. "Overlord, our orbital bombardments are being disrupted. They're feeding our systems conflicting data. The moment we fire, our weapons—" "Enough," Sithrak snapped. "We are the Dominion. We do not lose to inferior species." Carr's expression was unreadable. "Sir, this isn't a species." He gestured toward the flickering holomap. "It's a war machine wearing the skin of a planet." Sithrak exhaled sharply through his nostrils. "Then we tear the machine apart." The bridge lights flickered. A sudden shift rippled through the fleet's systems. Glyphs distorted. Fleet positions scrambled. The entire tactical network was being rewritten in real time. And then a voice, human, projected across every Vakar frequency, every Dominion warship, every soldier's communication link. A message from the void itself. "You thought this was an invasion," the voice said, deep and controlled. "It's not." The static wavered, then returned sharper now. "This is an execution." Sithrak's breath stilled. Down on the battlefield, General Zirath Morn heard the same message, but this time it wasn't just a voice. It was a warning. And it was the last thing his men ever heard, before the sky itself ignited. A streak of white-hot destruction tore through the upper atmosphere, slicing across the sky like a blade of raw energy. A weapon unlike anything in Dominion archives. It struck the earth with a force so violent that the ground buckled inward, sending titanic shockwaves through the battlefield. The remaining Vakar divisions were erased in an instant.
The weapon wasn't plasma. It wasn't ion-based. It was something else. And then, for the first time in his long existence, Zirath Morn felt fear. Deep beneath the fortified layers of Earth's hidden command center, Grant Halstead turned away from the targeting relay, his expression carved from steel. "Black Dawn is online," Dr. Quentin Voss confirmed, voice steady, despite the enormity of what they had just unleashed. "First strike effective, tactical collapse of enemy ground forces within the projected range." Marshal Aldrich Kane let out a slow breath, running a hand down the length of his fatigues. "That's one hell of a warning shot." Halstead didn't answer. He watched the data feeds flicker, analyzing the fallout. There was no emotion behind his stare. No celebration, only calculation. "They'll retaliate," Admiral Dirk Savrin murmured, his gaze fixed on the Dominion fleet still holding above the planet. "They'll send everything they have left." "Let them," Halstead replied. "We're not done." On the command deck of the Harbinger of Dominion, silence clawed at the air. Sithrak's claws trembled against the display. One strike, one single strike, and an entire Vakar war division had been turned to dust. This is a deception," he growled. "No species develops weapons of this magnitude without detectable progression. This is beyond their level of advancement." "It isn't technology," Orvos murmured. His pupils had dilated, his posture rigid. It's knowledge. They knew how to kill us before we even arrived. The words settled like a weight on the command deck. Sithrak refused to acknowledge the shift in atmosphere, the undercurrent of something that had never existed among the Dominion before. Now, doubt, prepare the next offensive, he ordered. We counter, we strike back. A silence stretched across the command bridge, and then, a whisper, a transmission, ghosting across Dominion channels, carrying only 2 words, your turn. Sithrak's pulse surged, his mandibles tightened, the weight of those 2 words sinking into him, like blades. And for the first time he began to wonder, had they truly invaded a world, or had they stepped into a war they never should have started? Silence gripped the harbinger of Dominion's command deck like a vice, stretching thin over the control slabs and hollow-eyed officers. The whispers still echoed in their ears. Those 2 words, too simple, too sharp, your turn. Sithrak sat unmoving, a predator frozen mid-stalk. He had given the order. Their next offensive was supposed to begin now. The Dominion fleet, wounded but vast, should have been closing in, raining annihilation upon this world like they had done countless times before. But the ships weren't moving. Status report, he snapped, his patience splintering. Orvo's car didn't answer at first. His mandibles twitched, his fingers gliding over the input relays again and again, as if he could will the system to obey. Nothing responded. Overlord. His voice was low, uncertain. Something is. The entire fleet buckled at once. A force unseen, intangible, gripped the Dominion warships and dragged them downward. Not the pull of planetary gravity. This was something else. The kind of force that didn't just pull metal, but flesh, bone, and soul. Sithrak's claws curled against the command chair, his pupils contracting into slits. Navigation, correct our trajectory now. The officers obeyed in frantic bursts, but the controls were not theirs anymore. Every Dominion vessel, from the smallest interceptor to the massive dreadnoughts, began descending toward Earth. This isn't a counterstrike, Orvos murmured, his voice hollow. It's an execution. Sithrak whirled on him, fury a searing presence beneath his armor. Enough of your superstitions. If our ships are being manipulated, then we sever their control, engage manual overrides. Orvo's hands were already moving, but the response came in an instant. Override denied. Not in Dominion script, in human language. Sithrak's breath turned to steel in his throat. Far below, in the fortified nerve center of Earth's final theater command, Grant Halstead watched Dominion warships flail against their unseen shackles. On the surface, their forces had crumbled beneath relentless urban sieges, but in orbit, this was where the Dominion still believed they were in control. Until now. The fleet's being dragged into our atmosphere at a calculated rate, Dr. Quentin Voss reported, watching the figures spiral across the tactical display. They'll breach lower airspace within minutes. Marshal Aldrich Kane adjusted his gloves, eyes scanning the projection. They think we're forcing a landing. Halstead exhaled. They're half right. Dirk Saverin's jaw tightened. And the other half, Halstead's stare didn't waver. They aren't landing. The air in the command center was thick with the weight of realization. The Dominion wasn't just being drawn in. They were being pinned to a battlefield where they had no maneuverability, no way to escape. Proceed with final engagement protocols, Halstead ordered. A single confirmation pulse flashed across the screen. Above Earth, the skies split apart. The Dominion fleet's fall had turned into a full collapse. Ships twisted violently, dragged against their own propulsion. Then the sky erupted. From the ground, from the hidden installations woven into Earth's very core, beams of ionized particle energy speared upward, lancing through entire warships, turning them into molten wreckage before they even breached the troposphere. The Dominion fleet built for conquest was not built for this. We're losing ships at catastrophic rates. An officer's voice broke through the discord on the Harbinger's bridge, his words edged with something close to terror. Our defenses aren't responding. They've rewritten our own firewalls. Sithrak could hear the unspoken truth beneath the panic. The humans weren't disabling their ships. They were repurposing them. Orvos, he snarled. What the hell have they done? Orvos' fingers trembled as they danced over the relay inputs, failing to regain control. They're inside everything, he whispered. Our ships, our weapons, Our war protocols. The realization clawed through Sithrak's mind like ice. The moment the Dominion had entered orbit, the war had already been over. He had never been the predator here. And then a voice slithered through the comm channels once more. Did you think we built our defenses in the sky? Halstead's tone was calm, unhurried. No, we built them in the ground, and you just walked into them. And then, the final maneuver activated. From the planet's surface, deep beneath the molten crust, Project Black Dawn reached its terminal phase. Earth's planetary disruptor grid pulsed outward, an invisible, overwhelming force that didn't just interfere with technology. It rewrote the very foundation of electronic warfare. The harbinger of dominion shuddered violently. Screens flickered, turning to static. Power grids ruptured in jagged bursts. The Dominion fleet's last remaining warships turned against their own command sequences, broadcasting new orders in human code. Sithrak's mind reeled as he realized what was happening. The humans weren't destroying them. They were stripping them down, reprogramming everything, turning the Dominion's entire invasion force into their own armada. Sithrak rose from his command chair, his every instinct screaming in defiance. This is not how war is fought. That's where you're wrong. The voice came through clear, unforgiving, final. You never fought a war, Sithrak. You walked into a harvest. The last Dominion battleship collapsed into itself. Its systems gutted, rewritten, reborn in humanity's image. And for the first time in his long, merciless reign, Overlord Sithrak knew what it meant to lose. The harbinger of Dominion drifted like a carcass in the planet's gravity well, its once magnificent hull now a skeletal ruin. Fires raged along its fractured spine, and its mighty war banners, symbols of an empire that had never known defeat, were nothing more than smoldering rags against the black. Sithrak's world was gone, his claws curled into fists, his breath shallow and ragged as the final Dominion warships collapsed into the ruin of their own making. Human algorithms had infiltrated everything, every fleet directive, every firing sequence. Every last war protocol had been ripped apart and rewritten before his eyes. And now the Dominion was no longer a fleet, it was a cautionary tale. Incoming transmission. One of the surviving officers croaked. His voice was hoarse, stripped of its usual confidence. Sithrak already knew who it would be. The main screen flickered. And there stood Grant Halstead, not a conqueror, not a diplomat, a harbinger of something far worse. He was seated at a war table, flanked by men who did not celebrate victory, because victory had never been in doubt. Halstead leaned forward, the calm in his gaze the most terrifying thing of all. This is how it ends, he said. Sithrak's mandibles clenched, his pulse roaring in his skull. You fight without honor. You manipulate, deceive, destroy from within. You do not conquer, Halstead. You consume. Halstead exhaled slowly, as if speaking to a dying animal. Honor? He tilted his head, amused. You burned worlds for sport, made trophies of civilizations, and now you're upset because we didn't fight fair. You're monsters, Sithrak spat. Halstead's expression never wavered. We are what this galaxy made us. His fingers tapped against the table. You see, Sithrak, your people thought they understood deathworlds. You thought Earth was just another place to test your strength, another battlefield to conquer. He leaned closer. You never considered what would happen if the Deathworld itself fought back. The Harbinger trembled as another Dominion warship fell into the burning atmosphere below, ripped apart by gravitational forces. Sithrak refused to bow, refused to break. Kill me then, he growled. End it now. Halstead exhaled, almost pitying. We're not going to kill you, Sithrak. A pause. A slow, terrible pause. Then Halstead gave him the real sentence. We're going to let you watch. Sithrak's pupils contracted. You invaded a world you didn't understand. Halstead continued. You thought you were the storm, the executioner, the blade at the galaxy's throat. His voice dropped, his next words shattering like glass. But we've been sharpening the knife for centuries. Silence. And then Sithrak felt the shift, the weight of something far greater than he had ever known. He turned sharply to the control slab, watched in horror as Dominion military colonies, across dozens of star systems, began vanishing from the war map, one by one, not from orbital bombardment, not from invasion, from systematic erasure. Halstead's voice, steady, relentless. You thought Earth was the target, but we were never fighting for survival, Sithrak. That was your mistake. Another Dominion stronghold blinked off the map. You weren't the ones hunting us. Another we were waiting for you. The final Vakar-controlled system flickered red, then black, and then there was nothing. Nothing but Earth. Nothing but humanity. Sithrak could not breathe. Halstead watched him, his expression unreadable. It's over. Sithrak trembled. His empire, built upon 1,000 lifetimes of conquest, had evaporated in the span of hours. This wasn't war. This was a slaughter they had never seen coming. Halstead stood. You won't be executed. You'll be sent back to whatever remnants of your kind still exist. Sithrak's breath shook. Why? Halstead's gaze was iron. So that the galaxy learns. His final words sealed the Dominion's fate. Earth doesn't get conquered. The transmission cut, and for the first time in Dominion history, the invincible Vakar knew fear.